Hi everyone. That evening, the skies over Albania were painted in gold. The spring sun cast its glow on snow-capped mountain peaks, while the wind carried the scent of the sea from the Adriatic coast. In the port of Durrës, a large wooden ship docked, carrying merchants, scholars, and soldiers from distant lands. Istanbul, the heart of the Ottoman Caliphate. Among the rolls of silk, fragrant spices, and exquisite ceramics, there was something far more precious. Words. Words about the one God, the compassionate prophet, and the laws that guide humanity toward justice. The people of Albania, who for centuries had lived under the influence of Byzantium and the Orthodox Church, were now hearing a new voice they had never encountered before. That night, in a modest wooden house, a young scholar named Ismail Effendi sat with the village elders. Before him, an oil lantern flickered in the wind, casting dancing shadows across the walls. Speaking in a mix of Turkish and Albanian, he told them about Islam, about the one God, life after death, and the brotherhood of humanity regardless of tribe or nation. His voice was calm, yet it seeped into hearts. At first, only a few were interested, but they saw something different. The Muslim merchants who came were not only selling goods, but were fair in their measurements, gentle in speech, and generous to the poor. Slowly, this story spread from market to market, from the port to the mountain valleys. Not long after, the first call to prayer in Albanian lands was heard, not from a mosque's minaret, but from a traveler who proclaimed it on the banks of the Shkumbin River. Villagers stopped their work, turned to look, and some felt a stirring they could not explain. That was the day history changed. A long journey began, one that would one day make Albania one of the centers of Islam in the heart of Europe. Years had passed since that first call to prayer echoed along the banks of the Shkumbin River. Albania was no longer just a small territory on the edge of the Balkans. The crescent banner now fluttered atop its fortresses, and Ottoman law began to take effect throughout the land. In small capitals like Shkodër, Berat, and Elbasan, majestic stone mosques rose high. Their towering minarets seemed to reach the clouds, while inside, Persian carpets absorbed the footsteps of worshippers coming to pray. The calligraphy of sacred verses adorned the walls, as if transporting anyone who gazed upon them to the Holy Land. Life had changed drastically. Madrasas taught Quranic exegesis, Islamic jurisprudence, and the Arabic language. Village children, who once only knew the fields, could now read the letters of the Quran. Markets bustled with goods from across the world: cloth from Damascus, olive oil from Anatolia, honey from Thessaloniki. Albania became a hub of trade and culture along the Balkan route. Yet the Ottoman influence was not only in trade and education. Sharia law began to be adopted in dispute resolution, while local officials governed their territories based on Islamic principles. Marriage, inheritance, and even commerce were neatly regulated, bringing order to society. On Ramadan nights, the streets were lit with lanterns. The beat of frame drums and the melody of qasidas flowed from mosque to mosque. People broke their fast together in mosque courtyards, sharing bread and hot soup with anyone who came, even with strangers and passing travelers. For the people of Albania, Islam was not merely a religion, but a way of life, a law, and an identity that united them. They began to see themselves not only as Albanians, but as part of the Ummah, the Muslim community stretching from the edge of North Africa to Central Asia. For centuries under the Ottoman shade shaped not only the face of Albania, but also its soul. And though they did not yet know it, a great storm would one day come, a storm that would try to erase all of this from history. In 1967, the skies over Albania looked gray, even though it was spring. On the streets of Tirana, giant posters bearing the face of Enver Hoxha adorned every building wall. Blood-red slogans hung from banners: "Religion is poison," and "We worship only the party." In a small village, The minaret of the centuries-old Etham Bey Mosque was climbed by a group of party youths. They took down the crescent moon at its peak and replaced it with the red communist flag. The elderly imam who tried to stop them was dragged away, his face bruised, his eyes filled with loss. Enver Hoxha, the communist dictator who ruled with an iron fist, made an announcement that shocked the world. Albania was now the first atheist state on earth. There would be no more mosques, churches, or temples. All religious symbols were banned. Mosques were turned into warehouses, bars, cinemas, even livestock pens. Majestic churches were converted into museums of atheism. Qurans and Bibles were burned in the middle of town squares. Saying a greeting of peace or uttering a prayer could lead to imprisonment, even death. In schools, children were taught that God was nothing more than an ancient myth. They were watched closely, even encouraged to report their own parents if caught worshiping in secret. Families hid their faith as if concealing forbidden weapons. Mothers recited dhikr silently while stirring soup. Grandparents prayed with faint movements at midnight, behind tightly locked doors. For decades, the younger generation grew up without the call to prayer, without worship, without sacred books. Albania became a silent land, a country that had once lived in the light of faith, now drowned in the darkness of atheism. Yet, in hidden corners, the embers had not gone out. Some still memorized short prayers, some kept a worn-out Quran buried at the bottom of a cupboard. They waited for the storm to pass. And that storm, like all storms, would one day subside. In 1991, Tirana shook. The communist regime that had gripped Albania for nearly half a century finally collapsed. In the streets, statues of Enver Hoxha were toppled by an angry people. The red party banners that once flew proudly now burned, their smoke rising into the gray sky. In a small village in Shkodër, an old man named Arif stood before the dilapidated building that had once been a mosque. Its walls were cracked, its carpets gone, its roof leaking. For 24 years, he had hidden his faith, praying only in his heart. But that day was different. With a trembling voice, he stepped into the middle of the empty room, looked up, and called the adhan for the first time since 1967. His voice was hoarse, but every syllable was like thunder splitting through decades of silence. Villagers poured out of their homes. Some wept, some covered their mouths in disbelief. Many young men and women had never heard the adhan in their lives, only vague stories from their grandparents. News of freedom spread quickly. Mosques that had been used as warehouses were cleaned and restored. Aid arrived from Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and other Muslim countries. Young imams were sent to teach. New Qurans were distributed to villages, and madrasas rose again. For the older generation, it was a reunion with the light they had once known. For the younger generation, it was their first introduction to their God. Across the nation, tearful embraces between fathers and sons, teachers and students, became a common sight. The Albania that had once been a godless land had now rediscovered its faith. But the journey was far from over. The challenge now was to rebuild not only the mosques, but also the hearts and souls that had been emptied for decades. The afternoon sun bathed the capital city of Tirana in golden light. From afar, the majestic Namazga Mosque stood gracefully, its white minarets reaching toward the blue sky. In the mosque courtyard, children ran and laughed, while the elders sat in small groups, chatting over cups of traditional Albanian coffee. Today, more than 99% of Albania's population embraces Islam, making it the country with the highest percentage of Muslims in Europe. But what makes it truly special is not just the number, but the way they preserve tolerance. In the big cities, mosques and churches stand side by side. During Ramadan, Christians often help distribute iftar meals. And at Christmas, many Muslims visit their neighbors to offer greetings. Ramadan in Albania is a celebration of light. Small lanterns decorate the streets, The aroma of pied bread and warm soup wafts from house to house. The Maghrib call to prayer echoes, followed by the gentle clinking of spoons against bowls of soup shared together. Children who fast for the first time are given small gifts by their parents as a sign of pride. Eid al-Fitr is a joyous occasion. In the morning, open fields are filled with worshippers dressed in their finest clothes. After the prayer, they embrace one another, wiping away tears of emotion. Homes open their doors to guests, with tables laden with baklava, bayrek, and sweet tea. For the people of Albania, Islam is an identity that survived the storms of history. From the glory of the Ottoman era, through the dark days of atheism, to the revival of faith, they have proven that belief can be buried, but never destroyed. Now, in the heart of a largely secular continent, Albania stands as a Muslim stronghold in Europe, not with the sword, but with smiles, warmth, and brotherhood. And with every adhan that echoes across the land, they remember, the light that was once extinguished now shines again, brighter than ever before.